How do you think it's been so far for you to run statewide for the first time?
You know, I've been running a campaign that's just focused on really hard work the whole time from the moment we started. And I'd say the difference, I guess, between running for state representative and running statewide is you use the same ideas, the same concepts, you just apply them differently. So I can't knock on every door in the state, obviously, but I do just sort of take the same approach of just not stopping until I can't go anymore each evening. So whether it's dialing the phone or shaking hands at a fair, it's basically the same principle.
So we don't really know who your opponent is going to be. Three relatively evenly matched people. It seemed like that campaign was fairly positive until the last 2 weeks, and then they kind of hurled non sequiturs at each other, so to speak. What has been kind of your view of your potential opponents, and what do you think is going to make you more attractive than one of them in the general election?
Well, Missourians so far have really responded to our message, which is that the Secretary of State's office should be a nonpartisan. You need a nonpartisan approach in that office. You need somebody who's going to have the courage to stand up and do what's right every day, regardless of whether that's easy or not. And with my background in the military, I mean, I've been to a place, I've been to Afghanistan, I've been to a place where people have lost faith in their government to do that, and I think my record on ethics reform and standing up to special interests in both parties speaks for itself. As for the Republican race so far, the primary, I think what we've seen is that every candidate in that race has pledged to run a partisan office, and I don't think that's what Missourians are looking for.
It seems like the difference between any of the candidates and you, they're gung-ho about photo ID. Democrats have tended to not support that at all. Without assuming anything, I'm guessing you take a different view than your Republican opponents on that issue.
Well, I think first thing is this issue, photo ID, is not the biggest issue facing Missourians right now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that every statewide office, every state office holder has to be focused on making sure we do everything we can to help Missourians who are out of work get back to work. And so for me, I look at, for instance, the Business Services Division of this office, which has made great strides over the last few years. I think we have a tremendous opportunity to do more through that office with entrepreneurship and routing people to resources that can help them be successful. Now, on the issue of photo ID, I think that the guys on the other side of this race have demonstrated that they can make any issue a partisan issue. But I think that we should look at this as there are many states that have figured out how to do this right. Okay, you look at Idaho, for instance. Idaho is not exactly viewed as a liberal stronghold, but Idaho is a state that has a strong and sensible photo ID law, but isn't extreme and unfair like what's been proposed in this state. I mean, for me, my military ID issued to me by the United States Army is something that I think if I walk into a polling station, I ought to be able to vote with that. Mm-hmm. And I think most Missourians agree with that. But what's been proposed in this state and the legislature wouldn't allow for that. I don't think that makes a lot of sense.
Last question before I let you go. There's been kind of a kerfluffle of sorts with the ballot summaries for the health exchange and also the Missouri Plan amendment that's going to be on the ballot. There's been questions whether there even needs to be a complete overhaul on how summaries are done with the commission or whatnot. First of all, what is your take on how the current Secretary of State did those ballot summaries, and do you think that the way to prepare ballot summaries need to be changed in this state?
I think that we have to have somebody in the Secretary of State's office over the coming years who's going to take a nonpartisan and a fair approach. That's always the approach I'm going to take. I've got a record of being able to stand up and be independent against special interests in both parties. What I don't think makes sense, what I don't think is fair, is Shane Scholer's proposal, for instance, of a commission of other politicians who he recommends would come together and make recommendations about ballot language. I think if that were to work, it would be the first time in the history of the world that involving more politicians in the process made it less political.
Mm-hmm. And actually, Stouffer and Roop agree with you on that point. So if one of them makes it, I guess that won't be an issue since you both will have the same position.
I think that it's not the only issue where we agree. I think that there are other areas where we can agree, because not every issue has to be a partisan issue.
Yeah.
Because I think that you have to approach this office in a way that understands that, and that's why I've not approached this race in the way that my opponents have. They've approached this race as a contest over who can run the most partisan office, and I just don't think that's right for Missourians.